So we are going to jump into this messy story, kind of acknowledging the mess. I know we've been in Hagar and Sarah's stories. We've looked at them individually, but I would like today to talk about their dynamic, their relationship dynamic together, as we sort of embrace the mess. I had tinkered around with calling this, For the Love of the Family, the mama drama edition, because there's some mama drama in this story. And so we've already covered many of these stories. We've covered how Sarah laughed when she's hiding from God, and she laughs when he promises, and he sort of corrects her, and then she lies to him, and he corrects her again. And we've talked about how they took things into their own hands and forced Hagar into this situation, and she gets pregnant. And Kelly talked about the first instance where Hagar then runs into the wilderness because she was mistreated, and that God meets her there. And so today I would like to really look at the second time that Hagar goes into the wilderness and sort of unpack some of this together. But I decided to title this A Tale of Three Mamas. And so we'll spend a good portion of our time with these two mamas, but I want to show you another hidden mom in the story at the very end. And I want to specifically look at what these moms reveal to us about God's heart. I'd like to remind you, as interesting and fascinating and sometimes gut-wrenching biblical stories and biblical narratives are, these stories are telling us something about who God is. And as tempting as it is to get caught up in the details and to identify with one of the characters, to make a good guy out of one and a bad guy out of one, you're really missing the point of the stories when we do that. These stories are meant to show us a record of who God is and what he is doing. So I want us to specifically look at, what does God feel about caretakers, about moms? And even if you're not a mom in this story, certainly there are things that apply. So just kind of lean in. But let's open up to Genesis 21. And let's unpack it together. We'll start in verse 1. It says this: Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said. I love that. He was gracious to Sarah as he had said. And the Lord did for Sarah what he promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him, which means laughter. And when his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. And so we see this sort of restoration, this fulfillment of God making good on his promise that he gave. In the last service, we have a sweet couple that's been in our church that has battled with infertility for 19 years. And we've been along that struggle, and they have some children that they have adopted, and out of the blue, not even trying, they got pregnant last year, and they dedicated their son last Sunday. And it was just a miracle because we've sat through so many tears. And so just seeing a small snippet, if you can imagine the amount of time they have waited, and as much, infertility has a different type of pain. If you've known someone who's battled this, it's an isolating pain that can leave someone feeling grieved and ashamed. And this was not, in this day and age, it would have been even more so, because there was this legacy that's to be left, an inheritance that's to be left. And so God has fulfilled his promise. And notice how many times it says on time, at the time he decreed, at the time. And so God's promises, can I just put a side note, they're not on our timetable, are they? He works in his own time, but he always fulfills his word. And so they have this child, and so now we pick up the next stage of the story a few years later. It says the child grew and was weaned. This is verse 8, talking about Isaac. And on the day that Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to him was mocking. So he was mocking her baby Isaac. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. Abraham is still his father. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he's your offspring." Now, I want to stop for just a moment and notice Abraham in this story, because Abraham is reflecting an attribute of God, the father heart of God that loves all of his children. And I want you to notice a pattern in the message that I preached several weeks ago, that Abraham, his nephew Lot, is in Sodom, and Abraham is distressed, and he's praying that God would spare Lot. And now you see him distressed over his son Ishmael. And as a matter of fact, this word, what says distressed in the Hebrew, it means that Abraham was trembling. He was trembling. He does not want this to happen. He's broken up and he's very grievous. So this is not, you see in this reflected, this broken heart of this father. And so God is comforting him and promising him even of this son Ishmael. And so it says, early the next morning in verse 14, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. And he set them on her shoulders and sent her off with the boy. And she went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. Now this struck me because in the next chapter of Genesis, we see Isaac grown up, and God tells Abraham something very parallel and similar. He says to take your son, your only son whom you love, and take him to the mountain of Moriah and sacrifice him. And the very next morning, the exact same phrase, Abraham gets up, he cuts wood, and he puts it on his son's shoulders. So you see these parallel stories, and again, this repeated pattern of Abraham's deep devotion to the Lord, Abraham's willingness to surrender his children to the Lord, Abraham's love for both of his children. And I just wanted to make that note here, and also note that when it says that Hagar was wandering in the wilderness, in the Hebrew, in the desert, it literally means wandering in the wilderness. So she's wandering around. In verse 15, when the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch my boy die. As she sat there, she began to sob. Now, one of the translations says, let me not see the death of my child. Another says, I cannot bear to watch the boy die. Verse 17, God heard the boy crying. Can we say that together? God heard the boy crying. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven, and he said to her, what's the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. So I'm so connected to this story, and I have to admit that Hagar is absolutely one of my favorite characters in the Bible. I love her. I love the fight in her, like in the last story where she gets a little sassy. Like I know it wasn't right, but like I still like it. You know, I can't explain, but And so I relate to her, but this particular story as a mom has a meaningful connection to me. Several years back, I have one son. I have 3 daughters and one son, and he is we call him the only begotten son. And so, and his hair was very blonde when he was a little boy, and so we'd say when someone would say his hair was blonde, he'd say, no, it's golden. It's golden. So then we started calling him the golden boy, much to the aggravation of all of his sisters. They didn't like that. So the golden boy. But my son is one of those types that the glass is always half full with this kid. He doesn't want to cry. He doesn't want you to be sad. If he's hurting, he's going to make a joke to make you not feel like it's that bad so that you'll laugh. He doesn't like you to hurt. And so he very rarely actually cries. Even when he was very little, it would take a lot for my kid to cry. And when he would, something that he couldn't help it, his lip would quiver, the little chin's quivering, and then like one little tear, but he would just try to hold it in, and he was like, no, I'm not crying, which makes it even sadder, because he's not trying to cry. So we had some family members that, we've moved 1,000 miles. We came here, so we don't have much family in the area, and so we had some family members that God had called to move away, and we were very close with. This was several years back, and it was just a season where God was moving them, and so we had told the family that they were going to be leaving, and I walked past his room and I hear him crying in his room. And so again, it's such a rare thing for him to cry. So I went in the room, and of course I'm comforting him, and he just broke. And he said, "Why does everyone leave? Why does everyone have to leave? Why don't we have family here? Why can't we have family?" And of course, gutted. And so if you don't know kids, when you cry, your mom holds it together, and then she does what? She goes in the room and she sobs. Yeah. So I was up most of the night just crying, like thinking about him, praying for him, just my heart broken. And the very next morning, I opened my Bible, and would you know, the story that happened to be in my devotion that day was this story. And when I got to God heard the boy crying, I lost it, of course. And I knew God was saying, I hear him. I hear your boy. I'm going to be with your boy. And what I love about this story is that God not only heard the boy crying, he told the mama that he heard the boy crying. He comforted the mom. And that's sort of the big grand point of today, if we summarize it out the gate, is that God is a father to moms. That he takes care of us, he takes care of our children. And if you're caretaking for someone, I know that it's so hard because we feel limited. We want to protect them. We want to create situations where everything goes perfect, and we just can't. But I'm thankful that as we mother, God is fathering us. And so I want to look at these two moms, though, not just Hagar, but I would like to look at both of these moms and state a few things out the gate. The first thing is both moms were imperfect. I would like to have you stand up in this room now, another category of moms. If you are perfect and you've never made a mistake, mom, would you stand to your feet? Now, I want to just highlight that we often want to pick a good guy or a good girl. And for me, I really want to pick Hagar. So Hagar's name means flight. Literally, that's the meaning of her name. And I feel her like she's a fight or flight girl, right? This is who she is. She is fighting for herself. She's fighting for her kid. And y'all know what Sarai means? Princess, ain't that right? But I just identify, I like an underdog. Anybody like the underdog? And for me, it's just hard. Like, I know Sarah is of the promise, but I also, this is a single mom. She's an immigrant. She didn't ask for this situation, and now she's out here by herself. This breaks my heart. And I want to put her as the good guy and Sarai as the bad guy. And in this situation, it is wrong. I just want to highlight and remind you that just as Kelly spoke about when she talked about the first time that Hagar left, that when the scriptures record details of things that people of God have done, it's not endorsing them, it's documenting them. It's not saying this is okay, it's being honest. That's one of the reasons that I believe the Bible it's so obvious that the Bible is the Word of God. Because we would hide these stories. We wouldn't tell these stories if we were trying to make this about us. But the Bible intentionally does not let any of us get to be the hero. God gets to be the hero. And I want to just highlight for a moment that although I would love to make Hagar the good guy and Sarai the bad guy, the scriptures don't give me permission to do that. It actually shows that both of them made some mistakes. Both of them were doing things to the other to hurt the other. As a matter of fact, on the first scenario in Genesis 16, when Hagar gets pregnant and Sarai has not been pregnant, and again, if you've ever known someone who's battled infertility, it is a deep, deep, shame-filled pain. And it says that she began to despise Sarah in her eyes. This is a lot about her eyes. She's despised her. Do you want to hear what the Hebrew word for this? It says she saw her as trifling. Literally, that's what it is, trifling. That she saw her as little. That she was insignificant. So she gets a little cocky, right? And so she's like, I'm going to take this. And so actually, when Sarah looks at Abraham and says, I gave my mistress to you and now she mistreats me, she actually says in the King James, my wrong be upon thee. My wrong be upon thee, Abraham. This word wrong means my violence. Literally in Hebrew, it's Hamas, violence. Isn't that interesting? The word for Hamas is violence, the ancient word for Hebrew. Her violence be upon me. So I don't know what exact circumstances or how Hagar acted, but it increased the shame. It increased the hurt. And guys, did it actually help her to fight back? It instigated this cycle. And it says that Sarai then began to mistreat Hagar, so she fled from her. This word mistreat in the Hebrew is to browbeat, to humble, to oppress, to afflict. So Hagar runs into the wilderness pregnant and alone by herself. God meets her there. God ministers to her, calls her by name, and then he tells her, go back and submit to your mistress. The interesting thing about this is to submit to your mistress. That is hard for us to read, isn't it? That is the same word as what Sarai did to her. Browbeat, humble, oppress yourself, go back. Ouch. You see, our ways are not God's ways, are they? Our thoughts, he's saying, humble yourself and I'll exalt you. Go back and submit. Now, this seems very harsh. It's very hard for us to understand, but I would like to just remind you that only a few chapters earlier, Lot, remember when he's fleeing, is begging the angels to provide a safe place. This is how violent and not safe the wilderness would have been for a young pregnant woman with no way to provide for herself. I love the clues in the text when you hear the conversation. When the angel meets Hagar, he asks her two questions. Hagar, where have you come from and where are you going? When a text is confusing in the scripture, I would challenge you to answer the questions. If God asks a question, answer it logically. Hagar, where are you going? Well, I'm fleeing from my mistress. But she never answered. When he says, where you come from, I'm fleeing from my mistress. But she never answered the second question, where are you going? Where was she going? There was nowhere for her to go. He's highlighting, baby girl, you don't have any place to go right now. You have no place, but I promise I'm going to take care of you. Go back and submit. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to take care of you. And he did. There's often more to the story than we really realize. And what I want you to see is that God heard her. You see, both these women were imperfect, and the scriptures don't hide this, but both these moms were also suffering. Both these moms were suffering. In Genesis 16, it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. I want you to notice that Egyptian slave. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Through her. I'll use her to build a family. She's afraid. Now, again, I want to pause because cultural context matters here. At this time, back in this day, there was no fertility treatment, was there? There's no IVF. There's no doctors. Surrogacy, this was a custom, this was a practice, and God meets people in the customs of the day. Doesn't mean he endorses it, but he's being honest about this custom. But I want you to notice, I'm going to build a family through her. The deep shame that she was feeling, and I also want you to notice how many times God speaks to women in the Bible. Before he does the papa, he comes to the mama, sometimes before the child's ever even conceived. Sometimes while the mom is pregnant, and he gives moms specific things about those children ahead of the story. Just start to notice how often in the Bible that happens. With Samson's mom, with Mary, the mother of Jesus. With Elizabeth, he tells this mom, I want you to think about Hagar, think about Sarah, think about the time even with the twin boys later on. And God comes to the mom and says, 2 nations are in your womb, and the older will serve the younger. Now, I have many things that God has spoken to me that, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, I'm just treasuring, pondering, and storing in my heart. No one knows them, even my husband. I don't tell my kids I want my kids to hear from God for themselves and not do what they feel like I want them to do. But I've been treasuring and pondering and storing these things. But can I tell you a temptation sometimes when God tells us things, God promises us things, we misunderstand and think God is telling us to make it happen. when God is just dreaming with his kid. Hey, sweetie, let me tell you a little bit about what's coming. You should name him this because this is what he's going to do. And so at this point, all God had said is they're going to have a child as an inheritance. The custom practice of the day was to do this. And so, as Josiah pointed out before, it's not that far-fetched that we would think, oh, I'm responsible to make what God said happen. Do you guys hear me? Just as the twin boys' mom did, forced a situation for the birthright because God spoke it, so she has to make this happen. Can I tell you that when God takes you out to dinner, he takes you to Cheddar's after church, right? You get those croissants with the honey butter on them. If he orders appetizers and desserts, he's not going to leave you with the bill. God pays for what he orders. And when God promises you something, he is going to make it happen. He fulfills the words that he speaks. He's not expecting you to. He'll give you instructions along the way, but sometimes out of fear, we try to make things happen on our own, and then things get messy, don't they? And so this is a son that was born out of a human attempt to fulfill a promise, a human attempt. Both moms were afraid. And you look at the story now when the child is weaned and now Ishmael's making fun of Isaac. Let's look at the timeline just a minute. So Ishmael was 14 years old by this point when Isaac is born. And at the feast, Isaac would have been weaned. Okay, we had a weaning party, right? Weaning party, we're going to still do weaning parties for kids, right? A weaning party, a weaning feast. At this point in history, children were typically weaned around 2 to 3 years old, sometimes 4 years old. So let's see what Ishmael's age is at this time. If Isaac was weaned at 2 or 3 and Ishmael was 14 when he was born, then Ishmael would have been about 16 to 17 years old in this story, the second story, maybe 18. And so it does give us a little more perspective when now you have this 17-year-old and a 3-year-old, and he's mocking and making fun of this 3-year-old. And you've read stories, you've seen probably documentaries on kings and inheritance and how the brothers fight and kill each other. This situation is getting dangerous. So Sarah's reaction may not be as unmerited as what we initially would think that it would be. But the point is that they're in this situation now. Both moms are afraid for their kids. And both moms are letting fear control their decisions. And the control is just leading to more hurt, isn't it? That it's not actually helping either of them. Do y'all know what mama bear means? We ask the kids that in Kids Today. What does mama bear mean? It means don't you mess with my baby, right? I consider myself a fairly sweet girl. I consider myself pretty slow to anger. I'm kind of chill. It takes a lot. I've had people scream at me in my face. I had somebody throw something at me before, and I'm okay usually. Not always, but pretty chill. But probably the most unchill you gonna see me is you messing with my babies, right? When your child is involved, somehow it's different. Now, where do we get that protective nature from? From God. Remember, the maternal aspect to protect your child, God hardwired that in us. So that is not wrong. That is God protecting kids through the female caretakers in their lives. However, he never expected us to wear the full burden of protecting them from everything. And we have to understand that fear, can you hear me, is a terrible parent. It's a terrible, terrible parent. If we look at Hagar's attitude in the beginning when she saw her as trifling, and she's bucking up to her, and her attitude has changed, she's mocking her. And now we see full-blown in her child, do y'all hear me? The same attitude has been duplicated in her child. You see, sometimes we think we're protecting them and we're actually infecting them. God's ways are not our ways. We watched a Christian movie, a very, very cheesy Christian movie, which my youngest was really into it, so we let it slide. The bad acting was killing me, right? But in this movie, it's kind of like a Hallmarky type movie, and by the end of the movie, They go through all these things, and by the end of the movie, one of the siblings in the family, after they have this whole, typical scenario, one of the siblings becomes the mayor, the other gets her music career back, and the other, it's all hunky-dory, and then the end of the story. And I looked at the kids, I was like, aw, it ended just like every Bible story. Everything good happens to the Christians, right? Tell me one. Because if I look at these stories, most of them, especially the New Testament, their ending story is, oh, you were hated, persecuted, exiled, and martyred. The end. And so God's ways are not our ways. And sometimes when we try to prevent suffering, what we're actually doing is standing in the way of God, because God uses suffering to create resilience, to show us how to forgive like him, to show us mercy. My 10-year-old asked me this morning, Mom, why are you preaching this morning? You just had surgery. Shouldn't you be resting? And I don't feel like God made me. Am I honest? What I spoke to her, I said, baby, do you think that the apostles ever had to preach when they were in pain? Do you think they had to preach when they were in chains? Why? I want my children to understand the reality of a broken world that we live in. And I would rather them have resilience. I'd rather them have tenacity. I'd rather them have grit and compassion. And guess what's going to give them that? Suffering. Why do I identify with Hagar? Because I've been the girl who buck up, right? I've been the girl who's made a mistake. Why do I identify with the foreigner sometimes? Because sometimes I felt like a foreigner in other places. Because I see the isolated, the broken, the hurting. But how do you get that if you've not experienced suffering? If you're always the princess? How do you develop the compassion of God? Suffering refines our children. But we see this cycle happening. I think it's very interesting that long before Abraham's descendants were slaves in Egypt, Abraham enslaved an Egyptian. Long before the children of Israel, Abraham's descendants cried out in the wilderness because they were thirsty, an Egyptian slave was fleeing from his oppressor, from her oppressor, and crying out in the wilderness, thirsty. Do you guys hear me? You see, sometimes, if we're honest, we always make ourselves the good guy and the other person the bad guy. Or let me get real trifling. I guess I'll use that word again. We make our children the good kid and the other person's kid the bad kid. Their kid did it. Their kid fouled on my kid. My kid didn't foul on theirs. It's the teacher, it's not my child. And what we don't understand is that suffering and discipline are some of the best things we can actually allow to happen naturally in our children's lives. That they refine them. And so we see this cycle happening. Now remember what Sarah said, I'll build a family through her. I want you to notice in Psalm 127, let me read this to you. It says this, unless the Lord builds the house or the family, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord, they're both trying to protect their children. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. Mama, Papa, could I tell you, in vain, you rise up early and you stay up late, toiling, striving for your kids to do everything for them. For the Lord grants sleep to those he loves. That's your permission to take a nap today. That's all she wants, by the way, for Mother's Day. That's it. That's all she wants. Maybe a massage, but... Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring, a reward from him. This is a psalm about family and children. And it's the Lord's responsibility to build. It's the Lord's responsibility to protect. And so both moms were imperfect. Both moms were suffering. But I want to show you that God also took care of both moms, didn't he? God made them both mothers. God saw them both. He spoke gently to both of them. Listen, God corrected both of them. God corrected both of them. What was he doing? God was fathering both of them. And not only did he father them, but God was fathering their boys. God took care of both these mama's boys. And while God did not agree with Sarah and Abraham's decision, he did not endorse it. It is not what he wanted for them to do this. At this time, it was what was best for Hagar and Ishmael to go away. Things were going to escalate and get worse. God did agree with this was the time for her to go. Now, why was it the time for her to go? If you time it again, let's go back. How old is Ishmael now? 16, 17, 18? And it says God gave him a skill. He was with the boy. He became an archer. He got a wife. In other words, now this son can take care of his mama. Here's the point. Not only was God protecting Isaac, God was protecting Hagar and Ishmael. He wanted to free them from slavery. He did not want Hagar and this boy to live in this house always as slaves. He wanted to free them like he did the children of Israel when they were slaves in Egypt. God set them free. He didn't want her out there in the wilderness, pregnant, alone, not taken care of. He waited for the time when he could set her free, and then he himself fathered that boy. Maybe you're a single mom in the house this morning. Can I tell you, the Lord is father to the fatherless, and he himself will care for that child. God was fathering these boys. What I love about this is that God loved both of these moms. God loved both of them. He loved both their boys. He promised both these moms beautiful things. And I want you to notice the parallel promises. Because Isaac was not the only boy that God had promised, so was Ishmael. In Genesis 17, it says this. This is God comforting Abraham. As for Ishmael, I've heard you, and I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful, and I will greatly increase his numbers. He will be a father of 12 rulers. Does that sound familiar to you? It's the exact same promise God gave Isaac, that 12 tribes are going to come, and I'm going to make him a great nation. His descendants are going to outnumber the grains of sand. The exact same promise he gave to Sarah, he gave to Hagar. God didn't send them away never to be heard from again. God made a promise. God kept his promise. And hear me, because this is mind-blowing. God, to this day, 4,000 years later, God is still keeping his promise to Hagar. Not just to Isaac and to Sarah, to Hagar. Both of these boys became great nations, and their descendants are still alive to this day. To this day. They're great nations. Both of them. But you want to know the ultimate way that God kept his promise to these moms? It's through Jesus. You see, if you really want to understand God's heart for all moms, it can only be understood through Jesus. We tell kids, and Aaron, you can come up, we tell kids all the time in children's ministry. You probably get tired of hearing me say this here, but we say it every single Sunday in kids ministry. All the Bible points to Jesus because Jesus is the point. Can we say that together? All the Bible points to Jesus because Jesus is the point. The reason we put this verse on our wall, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, I don't know which side it was on, but that side, there we go, is because this is the thesis statement of the Bible, the whole point. After Jesus died, he takes a walk with his disciples, and it says he begins to show his disciples where he was in all the scripture. Jesus said this, that he didn't come to abolish the law, he came to fulfill it, that he completed it. You see, you cannot understand any biblical story. It's not complete until you look at that story through the lens of Jesus and the cross. Do y'all hear me? Jesus completes the story. You have to look at it through the big picture lens of the whole Bible. What's this about? Who was coming through Isaac? Jesus. Why did God have to protect Isaac? Jesus was coming through Isaac, not just to save Isaac and his descendants, but to save Ishmael and his descendants. God wanted to save the world. As a matter of fact, Ishmael's descendants to this day, the largest, the greatest growth in the Christian church, the most salvations are coming from the persecuted Muslim communities. They're encountering Jesus. There are stories coming out of the Middle East where people who have never been exposed to Christianity are dreaming and encountering of Jesus showing up and meeting them there and rescuing them. Women like Hagar being freed from slavery and persecution and sexual domination, being set free, and now preaching the gospel underground at the risk of their lives. Come on and tell me Hagar's legacy isn't still alive. God's made his promise to her. He met her face to face, and he's still keeping good on his word. Isn't it amazing that the things that God promises us about our children, that even after we're dead and gone, he still remembers he made those promises to that mama? Her prayers, the conversations. Can I tell you, some of your mamas are already in heaven. Your grandmamas are in heaven. Do you know that God is still making good? Her prayers still ringing for you right now. Many of you are sitting in this room today because a believing mama, believing woman prayed and talked to the Lord about you, and God heard her cries for you. God's still making good on his promise. But I told you there were 3 mamas in this story, didn't I? You ready for the third one? If every story has to be completed through Jesus, we want to know what God feels about all moms, because John 1:18, let me just say this. It says, no one's ever seen God. So by the way, if Hagar says she saw God face to face, think about that for a moment, and let's read this verse. No one's ever seen God, but the unique one, Jesus, who is himself God, is near to the Father's heart, and he's revealed God to us. So who did Hagar see face to face if you can't see God's face? Jesus. Isn't it interesting? Jesus shows up in the wilderness and goes and gets her. I love that it says he found her, which you know what it means? He was looking for her. He went looking for that baby, scared and alone and pregnant by herself. He found her, and face to face. Why does he ask Abraham over Sarah, where is your wife Sarah? She's in the tent. He wanted to talk to Sarah face to face. You see, we play favorites. God doesn't play favorites. God loves all of us. He came to save the world. And the ultimate way he reveals his heart for all moms is through Jesus. And so we look at, how did Jesus see moms? The third mama in our story is Jesus' mama. John 19:25. Can I just stop and say for a moment how much Jesus' mama relates to these women? She was also unmarried and pregnant. She also had to flee to Egypt when her baby was young. She also watched her son thirst on a cross and suffer. She also watched her son be persecuted and mocked. She related to these 2 women. It says this, standing near the cross were Jesus' mother and his mother's sister Mary. I love that. His auntie was right there. And Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple he loved, he said to her, dear woman, here is your son. And he said to this disciple, here is your mother. And from then on, his disciple took her into his home. What's he doing? He's the oldest son. He was taking care of his mama. And so he left her in the hands of someone who could take care of her in his absence. But look at this next line. This blows my mind. On the cross, suffering, and this is what he's doing. Jesus knew that his mission was now finished. And to fulfill the scripture, he said, I'm thirsty. This blows my mind for many reasons. One, his work was not finished until he took care of his mama. I love the surrogacy of the church. That when he's in that cross and he's unable to care for his mom and his heart is beating for her, I wonder if in that moment when Jesus looked down at this woman watching her son be mocked, I wonder if maybe perhaps he thought back to Hagar, the conversation he had with Hagar. Or could it be that when he met Hagar in the wilderness, he was thinking ahead to his own mama watching her son, perhaps saying, I can't bear to watch the boy die, thirsting on the cross. You see, where we get our compassion and our tenderness is from the tender, compassionate heart of our Father, who not only loves children, but he loves the caretaker. I told you about my nemesis, this dang brace. And for about 3 years, I have battled some pretty intense pain, nerve pain that shoots of sensory loss in this leg, just lots of stuff going on, and muscle and bone pain. But after surgery, that first 10 days were just a lot of swelling and things. They told me that I was at a big risk to damage what would happen during surgery, so I have to give it time. I have to give it a month where I don't move it too much, where I let it just solidify. And so I've battled a lot of pain, but that first, especially maybe 7 to 8 days, was the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. Nerve shooting pain, muscle pain from aching, and then we had to, not just with this, but keep my foot this way, and so a lot of muscle pain, swelling. I told Vicky, who was staying with me, my husband, that the difference this time with the pain, though, I described it as like claustrophobic pain. Because prior, with chronic pain, I could move around, I could reposition, I could go somewhere else, and with this, I couldn't. I'm just stuck, unable to kind of get out of the situation. And so I guess it was like the third day after surgery or something, we had tried everything. Doing all the techniques to try to deal with this, and it's excruciating pain. And so realizing that I kind of just stuck, I can't get out of it. I was crying in pain, which I feel like prior to this whole past couple of years, I never remember actually physically crying from physical pain before. Never experienced that type of pain. But this was the worst of anything I've ever experienced. It was pretty hard. But getting to that place and not knowing how to get out of it, I just began to pray and ask God to help me. So I was just in bed, and I had worship music on, and I was just, God, Jesus, please come, please help me. And immediately I feel his presence and just compassion and understanding. And it was like I knew he understood that kind of pain. That nailed to a cross, you would feel every nerve shooting through your arms and legs. They had to dislocate my femur in order to repair what was going on there. But I think about every joint being pulled out of socket. I think about the incision pain, but every incision on his body, the physical exhaustion, the dehydration, the emotional pressure, and being trapped, the muscle pain that was likely there, but being trapped in this position, unable to move, unable to get out of it, and all I could do was thank him. I just began to say, I'm so thankful for you, that you would do this for me. Thank you. And then my mind began to go to the apostles, to Peter, who was crucified upside down like this, to Paul, who gave his life, to John. And I know it sounds really stupid, but I said, thank you, Jesus, for doing this. And thank you, Father, for letting him do this. But thank you for Paul. And if you see Paul and Peter, will you tell them I said thank you, that I have the Bible today, because they were willing to go through this. I just felt loved. And what's so amazing is that it doesn't just feel like he understood me, but in a very tiny, infinitesimal, so small way, I understood his pain a little better through suffering. I understood his love through suffering. And it was crazy because I was thinking about this story, and it was just like I heard the Lord say, I heard my boy crying, and I couldn't bear to watch. He is a father that understands and that spared nothing, even giving his only son for us, to seek and to save us. And he's here now with us. And so I want to pray for you, but could we just thank the Lord for his kindness? Would you close your eyes just for a moment? I know we thank God for the mamas in our life, but could we thank God for his nurture, for his love and compassion? that he loves our kids and those we love more than we could ever love them. He knows what it's like. My mom's in a hospital today. He knows what it's like to be stuck in a situation where you see your mother, your widowed mother, and you can't help her. And yet he sends people to care for them. He's so understanding, and he loves us.